Oh, thanks, Tom, for coming along today. So thanks for being involved in another episode of Forest Facts with Matt. It's great to have you along, and you're based in the UK, I believe.
That's correct, Matt. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, great. No, thank you very much. So, Tom, I was just wondering if you could just give us a bit of background on your work history and what you currently do in forestry at the moment.
Yeah, so I work for a family-owned business, fifth generation sawmilling company, James Jones and Sons. I've worked here for 2 years. My background is in forestry. I trained at university. I did a Bachelor of Science in forestry and woodland management, and I then left university. I went to work for, quite surprisingly, it wasn't my plan actually. I went to work for a large panel board company called Egger. They're an Austrian family-owned company. I worked there for a lot of years. I travelled around Europe and North America. I spent some time in North Carolina, and then I came back to the UK and I decided I wanted to get some experience in sawmilling. So I went to work for a small family-owned sawmill in Northumberland, not far from where I live. I spent 2 years there sourcing timber for them, and then I joined James Jones 2 years ago. So I'm very much a forester through and through. I'm a member of the Institute of Chartered Foresters, which is our chartered membership in the UK for our sort of, I think it's the equivalent of is it a professional forester or a registered forester in
Yeah,
Australia?
that's right. Yeah, so I'm a registered forestry professional, which is I think probably the equivalent of your chartered forester in the UK. Yeah, yeah,
That's right, and you have to go through a sort of assessment process,
yeah,
sort of prove that you've got the right level of work record, the continued professional development, and write a critical analysis to get to that chartership. So,
yeah,
that's something I'm really passionate about. I think that as foresters, being able to demonstrate professional standards and being able to build trust with not just the sector but also the public is really, really good, and having that uh, sort of recognised chartership or registered forester status is really important.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. You're very experienced, Tom. You've had a lot of different experiences, which is great. How do you compare what you've experienced in the UK to you've travelled a little bit to sort of other parts of the world that you've travelled with from a forestry perspective? How do you compare forestry and the way it's practiced in the UK to some other places you've been to?
Well, that's why I like doing things like this, Matt. To be honest, it's really good talking to
Yeah,
people from different parts of the world, cross
yeah,
border, because you often find that there's lots of universal similarities and challenges and things that you can learn from. How are people in Australia, how are people in North America, in the US, tackling things like misconception of forestry, or things like how do you source timber sustainably.
yeah,
Certification schemes, quite often we share the same certification schemes, but they're seeing different challenges in different areas. So I think that knowledge exchange is really important. It's something that I've been really sort of passionate about, and I've been a huge beneficiary of just going to different parts of the world and speaking to people who are interested in sourcing timber, in forestry, in manufacturing things from timber, and seeing those different challenges. It's fantastic. I've always sort of come back to the UK. I don't know why, because our weather's terrible and
yeah,
stuff. But I think forestry in the UK is it's quite special in a sense that we are quite a cottage industry. It's quite a small industry compared to
yeah,
other things that we do, other sectors. But in the same respect, it's hugely important. We're a huge importer of timber. We don't
yeah,
have that much forest. We actually only have 13.5% forest cover across the whole of the UK. I think I mentioned to you before that before we started talking here that we've got about 3.2 million hectares or 3.3 million hectares of forest. In the UK compared to Australia, that's absolutely
yeah,
minuscule, but and it's usually the same in other parts of the world as well. But the
yeah,
forests that we do have are hugely important, and we ask a lot of them. We need to get timber from them. We need to enjoy them for recreation and social benefit. We need them for biodiversity conservation. So we ask a lot of a small area of forest that we have in the UK.
Yeah. So I suppose it's a pretty good lead into my next question. You've described about how important forestry is in the UK, but and you've touched on some of them. But what are some of the main challenges of forestry in the UK?
Yeah, well, I think much the same as other parts of the world. There's huge misconceptions with what forestry is,
Yeah.
and I think that it's quite often born out of the fact that we associate as a society cutting down trees is generally a bad thing. So whereas from a forester's perspective, a well managed forest needs you need to cut down trees. It's a fundamental fact, whether that be thinning, whether that be clear felling, and of just generally doing sort of maintenance in a forest. So I think that that's probably the biggest challenge that we've got is this sort of perception of what forestry is, and obviously you and I have done things that the whole industry are doing things to try and dispel some of
Yeah.
those misconceptions. But I think that it's quite hard because as I said, in the UK at least, forestry is such a small industry, and quite often, the public see forestry as, well, we want to go to a car park up and do some mountain biking
Yeah.
or do some
Yeah.
walking or use the forest in that way. And actually, any thinning operations or clear fill operations are actually just a nuisance and they get in the
Yeah.
way of that. So
Yeah.
um, it's quite hard to then try and communicate. Well, that needs to be done in order to have a well managed forest, a healthy forest, and a forest that people generally enjoy more, because quite often people want to walk around thinned, nice, sort of cathedral like
Yeah.
sort of uh, forests of either native or non-native species. That's the other sort of discussion that's happening in the UK at the moment. I think that we've got this sort of broadleaf versus conifer, native versus non-native discussion, which probably needs to mature a little bit in terms of obviously we know as foresters, as forest scientists, things like that, we need to diversify species to make forests more resilient. But we also need to be able to produce timber efficiently, and
Yeah.
there are trade-offs with that. And I think that as long as everyone goes into these sort of conversations knowing that there's got to be trade-offs, that I think that we can have much more reasonable conversations about it instead of being sort of polarized at one end or the other. We've got that sort of perception of you're either a Sitka spruce Puritan, which is like your Pinus radiata,
Yeah.
you want just blanket that everywhere, or you've got native species only, minimal intervention, high biodiversity value at the other end. But I think
Yeah.
that we've got to get onto the spectrum and go, right, we've got to find somewhere in between where we get a good mix of both and other
Yeah.
silvicultural practices like continuous cover forestry and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely sounds like you've got similar issues to here in Australia. So I was just wondering, from a UK perspective, does the forestry industry, are they like quite united? Do you have like a united sort of voice in promoting the industry, like, or is it sort of, do you have a whole heap of different sort of associations that go out there and sort of pitch things a bit differently, or is it like a bit of a united front?
So I think that from the sort of more productive commercial end, we have an organisation called COMFOR, the Confederation of Forest Industries, who
Yeah.
are advocating for timber production, for having productive forests that industries rely on, that contribute a huge amount to things like GDP and investment in the UK. Which is really important. But I think we also have other organisations like I mentioned the Institute of Chartered Foresters, which
Yeah.
are a little bit more of an eclectic mix of everyone on that spectrum that I mentioned before, from the sort of conservation side right the way through to sort of heavy production forestry.
Yeah.
So I think that there are multiple voices. We also have the Royal Forestry Society, who are much more focused on education and trying to sort of get landowners involved in sort of that education process as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that that sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge, I guess. And what you've sort of touched on there really is that, having that one voice is really powerful.
Yeah.
And sometimes those different organizations have different views on things. So, but
Yeah.
when they come together, it is so much more powerful. It's such the message hits so many different people and in a positive way. That yeah, having a united front is always the more positive thing. So finding that middle ground, finding that that sort of area that we can all sort of agree on as a sector, and then presenting
Yeah.
that to the public is going to
Yeah.
be hugely beneficial.
Yeah. I was just wondering too, Tom, how's the industry going over there from early career professionals? Like, is it difficult to you see many young foresters sort of coming into the industry? Is that something? Is it difficult to get people to come and take up forestry as a career or not?
It was, and I think that the work that those organisations I just mentioned have done in the last sort of 3 to 5 years has been, tremendously impactful, and we've seen huge amounts of offerings of apprenticeship programs, of trainee programs. We've just started one with the Institute of Chartered Foresters, where there's a mentoring program now for early career professionals. So they
Yeah.
essentially get paired up with a buddy or a mentor, and they hopefully benefit from having somebody who's more experienced in the sector pass on their knowledge, and quite often that happens in big companies and organizations where a young forester comes through and they learn from people who are more experienced in senior positions. But I think that
Yeah.
quite often that doesn't necessarily happen when you're a self-employed forester, or you're you may be working for a much smaller company, and time is really of the essence, and you don't really have much time to actually sort of reflect and
Yeah.
hone your skills. So yeah, I think that there's a huge amount of work being done. The one area that I'm probably more concerned about, if I'm honest, is drivers, operators, the guys at the sort of real cutting edge, the sort of
Yeah.
the what we call the coal face.
Yeah.
That's the area that I'm a little bit concerned about, and I think that I can see there's a demographic in the UK of operators, drivers who are much older, and that at some point there's not really the backfill there to sort of, I don't know if that's the same
Yeah.
in Australia.
Yeah. No, it's pretty similar. Yeah. So call them contractors. So yeah. So the forest manager will engage contractors,
Yeah.
the harvest operators and the log truck drivers and that type of thing. Yeah. It's definitely an aging workforce, if you like, probably similar to what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's and for me that's that sort of is counterintuitive when we talk about sustainability, because
Yeah.
sustainability really has to have that that constant backfill of people coming through, and we need those we need guys who can do the real sort of the manual labor stuff, the sitting on machines and doing the felling, the extraction, the driving the timber to the end user. That area is probably what concerns me the most.
Yeah. No, it's great, Tom. You've covered a lot of things, but what I guess gets you out of bed every day, and what are you most optimistic about forestry in general?
I think that we do have a hugely positive message to deliver. It's just actually doing it and how we do it, and making it impactful. I think what gets me out of bed, I just enjoy it. I really enjoy meeting people. This is great.
Yeah.
I love this sort of thing. Meeting new people, trying to get involved in as many different things as possible to sort of, just understand it more and really learn. Forestry is, it's a hugely important sector, but it's hugely underappreciated and overlooked quite often. So the
Yeah.
more that we shout about these things, the more people hopefully appreciate it.
Yeah. No, it's great. Thanks, Tom.